Okay, we're good?
We have speed on A, speed on B.
Okay. Welcome.
Hello,
And you are my grandfather.
I'm your grandfather. I'm proud of it.
Glad you could do this. This is going to be big. This is going to be fun.
Okay,
Okay.
if you say so.
I know so. It'll be great. Let's just keep it conversational. Let's keep it fun. And, whatever you need, let me know. If you need to stop for any reason, we'll stop.
Will do.
Just let me know. And when if you want to hold something up to show, hold it up for a little while so that he can cut to camera B and zoom in on it so we can
Okay.
see good photos and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So let's start off with the beginning.
Where?
You enlisted.
Oh, when I enlisted?
What prompted it? What?
Well, I was living in Los Angeles, California. I had just gotten out of junior college in September and went to work for the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, California. And I lived in LA because that was the big town. And my brother lived there with us in a boarding house. So when war was declared, I was working at Lockheed. We went to go to work on it was a Sunday morning, and I was in a movie house. And I went to the restroom, standing next to a sailor, and he said to me, "Did you hear about Pearl Harbor?" Well, like everybody else, I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was, but I found out in a hurry. Next morning, Monday, when I went to work, they were putting up anti-aircraft guns around the plant, and they could hardly get in. So that was my indoctrination to the beginning of World War II. My brother and I, we decided, because our father was in the Navy at this time, he was already recalled, that we would like to join the Navy. So we went down to the recruiting office in Los Angeles there and applied to join the Navy. Well, we were both aircraft mechanics, so they offered us a aviation metalsmith second class rating, which was pretty good at the time. And we didn't take it. And we thought about it. And later on, about another month or so, I went over to the place in Los Angeles where you signed up to become an aviation cadet. 624 South Ardmore Street. My God, what a memory. Anyway, they said, now go back and we'll call you. So when they finally called me, and I don't remember how long it was, but we had to take a mental examination and a physical examination. Well, physically I didn't have any problem. The mental, I didn't know what would happen. Well, as it turned out, there were only 8 out of about 35 guys who passed, and I happened to be one of them. I guess I guessed right on the questions. So they said you passed. And some of the funny things, the guys who were trying to get in there, and we were taking this examination, and there was a major, he was giving us, listening to our hearts and all that sort of thing. And he looked in this one guy's ears, and he called over his accomplice there, if you want to call him that. He said, "I don't think we can use this boy. He hasn't got any eardrums left." And the guy said, "Well, how did you lose those?" Well, he says he'd been down at Camp Han, where the artillery range was, and he lost his eardrums. So that left him out. Then he had another guy there, and he called him over, and he says, "Listen to this heart." And it was kind of sad in a way. The major listened to his heart, and the other guy listened to his heart. He says, "You'll never have to go in the service." So you knew right then that this guy wasn't exactly in fit condition. But anyway, I got through it. And then let's see, that would be in early 42. Then in April, they said, "You're ready." I said, "Okay." And I quit my job at Lockheed, and they didn't call me. And so I got another job at Fruhoff Trailer. Then I worked 1 week there, and they called me and said, "Report to Santa Ana." And so I quit everything, gave my car. I had a car. I gave it to my brother Bill. And I went over to Santa Ana on a train right out of Los Angeles. And I was sworn in as an aviation cadet there. And you spend so much time, and I can't remember when. and you qualify for either becoming a pilot, a bombardier, or a navigator. Well, I managed to get qualified in all three, so I chose to be a pilot. After taking ground school there, we went to ground school, and we learned how to navigate, so to speak, and what kind of a cloud the rains came out of, all that sort of thing. Then we were sent to Hemet, California for primary flight training. And there we started out to learn to fly in Ryan PT-22s, the Ryan Aircraft Company. That's the company who made Lindbergh's plane, you know. But anyway, we started there. Well, I got along pretty good, except for the fact that I couldn't stall that airplane correctly. I could spin it good, but I couldn't stall it.
And what does that mean, stalling it?
By stalling it, you get it up and you decrease the power, and then she'll drop off on you. Well, she's supposed to drop off nice and straight. And depending on your rudder application, I kicked left or kicked right and couldn't keep the nose going straight. But spinning, I was good at spinning. Get it up there, pull the stick back, kick her left rudder, and around she goes, and come out with your nose on where you want it. So they said, well, take him up. So I took my solo ride and managed to solo, and it was a hell of a solo. But I got it down fine, and then I took a couple of check rides. They said, we're going to send you back to Santa Ana for further training. And this was one of the blackest days of my life, because I wasn't the only one who washed out. Some of my good friends, and I wanted to be with my friends. And these were some pretty smart boys. One I remember very well, a Stanford graduate. And they sent him to the infantry. And they sent me back to Santa Ana to train to become a bombardier. So I did. I went through flight school again, or primary flight school again, or that is pre-flight school. And then they sent me to Deming, New Mexico, to bombardier school. So I learned to drop bombs. And the funny thing about that, my pilot's class of 43-14 graduated and was commissioned the same day that they were from flight school. So, and one day they all flew down there, and we had a good old reunion. Anyway, we left Deming, New Mexico as brand new second lieutenants and a leave of absence. And I went out to 29 Palms to see my folks and that sort of thing. And that was good. And from there, I went to Salt Lake City, right out here, and I was stationed at the fairgrounds. And there we went to radio school. Now this was called the 18th Replacement Wing out there. A lot of the cadets went to Kearns, but we didn't go there. We went to the fairgrounds, where the fairgrounds are now, or where they were. Then one day they said, okay, everybody meet down at this hall, you're going to get crewed up. So we go down there and they pick a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and 6 enlisted men, gunners and radio men, that sort of thing. And now these are the 10 guys. Those 10 guys you're going to be with them for the rest of your life. So from there they put us on a train. Everything was in a train in those days, across the country to Dyersburg, Tennessee. And that's northern Tennessee. And northern Tennessee was just about on the same parallel that Salt Lake City is. In the wintertime, it's cold. In the summertime, it's hot. Well, we were there in November and December in our first operational training in the B-17 4-engine bomber. And these were the old, awful bad aircraft. The one I remember one day flying with one with a hole in the nose, in the plexiglass nose. And to keep the wind from rushing in, I put a big seat pad across it and held my foot on it while I run the bomb sight. Well, we had a lot of fun there. And we trained there for about a month and a half, and all of a sudden they said, you're going to MacDill Field, Florida. And I thought, oh boy, is this going to be nice. And it was. We were all dressed in overcoats and checked in down at MacDill Field and threw them all away. This was summer down there in wintertime. So anyway, we trained there out of MacDill Field, and that was fun. We got to do high-level bombing and low-level bombing, and we were a bunch of young kids doing some crazy things. And I'll tell you couple of the crazy things we did. One night, we were alone, solo, and we went down to Cuba. And we came flew the pilot was a crazy guy too. We flew up the main street of Havana, Cuba, at not more than about 50 feet high. If there'd have been any, and this was nighttime. And when he got right over the town there in the street, he put those propellers in full pitch and roared right down the main street. Well, if anybody had had a balloon or a big tower up the end, we didn't know. We'd have probably crashed it. But anyway, that's one of the crazy things.
Now, how old were you?
I was 21 then. Yeah, I was 21. One of the other crazy things we did, we had to go up and bomb one day on a target out in the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm really working hard over the bomb site, and I'm going to drop one bomb and come around and drop another one. Okay, I finally zeroed in and let my bomb go, and all of a sudden, I see all these splashes coming up around the target. And sure enough, here's a B-26 off our wing, and he dropped on my release. And it was nice. At least it made me think, well, I was doing pretty good. Another time, and this will really chill you, we were down there. We were supposed to be at 25,000. We were going to do some gunnery practice. And the boys in a B-26 were going to come by, and we're going to shoot the dickens out of this sleeve, target sleeve. Well, we decided he never showed up. So that was all right with us. So we went down on the deck, and we're flying around a little island out there, and a bunch of ducks come up. And I had a big 50 caliber machine gun, a dual machine gun right there. And believe it or not, I shot a duck down. I let go a burst, a little behind, brought it up a little bit. Next thing, just a blob of feathers. Oh, God, we were crazy. We were so low that day that you have what they call a trailing antenna on that airplane, which to pick up radio signals and send and receive. We lost the trailing antenna on the island. We were that low, it knocked it off. So we went back and landed. The other crazy thing we did one day, and this was a bad one, we flew out of MacDill, and I was to drop 6 bombs. And these, we were handling 100-pound general purpose bombs. And I had another bombardier with me who'd been over the target before, and he told me right where the target was and everything. So I put those 6 bombs on an intervalometer and let them go on this island. Yeah, that's fine. And I watched them go boom, 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 right across. When we landed, everybody came out, who in the hell dropped the bombs on the wrong island? Well, I think it was me. But the island was uninhabited, so it didn't bother anybody. Well, anyway, after we trained at MacDill Field for a while, and it was at MacDill Field that we formed as a group. And we were the 463rd Bomb Group Heavy, which would go overseas, not as a replacement, but as a complete group. So we went to West Palm Beach, Florida, and then first we went to Lakeland, Florida, and we trained out of Lakeland, Florida, doing practice runs and that sort of thing. We'd get up there in the mornings, and the guys, the fighter pilots, would come and bounce us, and we'd do all kinds of crazy things. But you can do that when you're 21 years old. Okay, then we got orders to go overseas. So we went to West Palm Beach, the whole bunch, already taken our go overseas physicals. I'm in line there, and they put a thermometer in my mouth, and I exploded it. The guy jerked me out of line and says, "Get in the hospital." So I took all my gear, and I had all the gear that you'd take overseas. I had a pistol and all that sort of thing, parachute, all that. So I was in the hospital for 5 days, and my group left without me. Now, how was I going to catch up with them? Well, anyway, I caught a ride with the ATC boy, Air Transport Command, who were going over to North Africa, and that's where we're supposed to go. But they didn't tell us that. I got on that airplane at night to go, and don't open these secret orders until you get a half an hour out. I ripped them open and looked at the town called Oudna, North Africa. Well, that was it. So I flew in a DC-3, a twin-engine DC-3, which was to be turned into a hospital ship. Had hangars or hammocks in there, and a big extra fuel tank, because we got to go a long way across the Atlantic Ocean. So we started out, and the first spot we landed was in Cuba. Then the next day we took off and we landed at Belém in South America. Then from there we flew out to the middle of the Atlantic, Ascension Island. And that's just a little 5x8 spit of land out in the middle. From there I flew to Marrakech, North Africa. No, I take that back. I flew to Freetown, and that was the Negro Free State in Liberia. From Liberia, I flew up to Marrakech, and at Marrakech, I finally met the group, and they were all there. So I said goodbye to the DC-3. He went on to England, and I was back with my crew. We didn't fly much out of Marrakech. I did some hiking around. I went into Tunis. I looked at the aqueducts, the old Roman aqueducts, stuff like that. Then we got orders to go to Italy. So we took off with the whole group, and this is about 36 aircraft. And we flew out over the Mediterranean, over Malta, and we were all set to move up to Foggia. Went over the radio, comes, get down in Sicily. So we had to bring the whole group down in Sicily. And this was funny because this was a British airfield there. And they had their twin-engine Mosquitoes there. And we come in with big, wide wingspans of 110 feet. And their light poles along the runway, we knocked all of those down anyway. They didn't like us. We stayed overnight there in Sicily, and then the next day we flew up to Foggia. We flew up and we landed at the wrong airfield. So they wouldn't let us stay there. Now get out, and you're supposed to be a half a mile up the street at Sonola. So we go to take off, and they're bringing their bombers back from the bombing raid on the Monte Cassino Abbey. It was only a short ways up the street, but they wanted to bomb that mountain because the German artillery command post was there. Well, we had to wait there with our engines revved up all the time. Finally, we took off, went a half a mile up the street, and landed, and that was our base at Foggia, Italy.
Now you've been in the service. So how many, I guess, months or years have you been in the service by this point?
Well, let's see. I enlisted. It was about April of '42, and it's been about a year, just about a year, yeah.
Okay.
Because we went over and we flew up to Italy in March. And it was the rainy season. And oh, Lord, it's rainy over there. And we started flying our bombing missions there. Our squadron, the 774 squadron, flew over. The rest of the group went over by boat. Fortunately, I didn't have to. That was a long 30-day trip. So I flew out of there, and I flew 14 missions there, and on some rough targets and some easy targets. And on the 15th mission, we were to fly over the Ploesti oil fields, and I've already been over that target once, but go over it again. And our target that day was the Americana Romana oil refinery, which was owned by Standard Oil Company. So what? So we flew in there with a maximum effort, and by maximum effort, the Air Force could put up close to 600 aircraft, 15 groups of B-24s and 5 groups of B-17s, with as much fighter support as we could get. Well, we got on the bomb run, we're doing pretty good, got the bombs away when whambo. I looked out and there's 6 feet of our wings standing up in the air. And I thought, well, that's not such a good thing. And we were talking back and forth in the airplane whether we could make it to Greece or not. Then we took another hit right close on the left wing. And Mellinger said, let's get the hell out of here.
How did that make you feel? Just that whole experience of being
Well,
hit?
the experience was you don't like to leave the aircraft, but you know that you're going to die if you stay in it, because it's done. The wings about to come off. So we bombed, and instead of turning off the target, we just went straight, and we lost about 1,000 feet of altitude when Mellinger said, let's get the hell out of here. I turned around, and my good friend McIntosh, the navigator, wasn't there. I said, oh, you left me. So I ran back up to my post there, and I took about 6 gas of good pure oxygen, because we were about 22,000 feet. And I went back, and I'd always thought about what happened if they had to bail out of that little nose hatch underneath the nose. If the bomb bay doors were open, would they cut you in two? Well, a simple basic law of physics is that when you bail out, you're going to have the speed of the aircraft, which might be 150 miles an hour. So you're not going to hit it or hit the tail. So I rolled up into as tight a ball as I could and bailed out. And I figured, oh boy, I'm going to make sure this chute opens. So as soon as I got clear of that tail, I pulled the ripcord. It opened. Wow, did it open. I didn't wait to slow down. I was still going the speed of the airplane. So it took about 15 to 18 minutes to get to the ground. And all the while, this chute is swinging back and forth. And I'm wondering, God, I hope nobody sees me. I saw a couple of German troop planes flying around, but they didn't see me, I guess. And finally, I hit in a plowed field. Nice afternoon, nice sunny afternoon on the 5th of May. And reached for my last cigarette. And nobody was there, and all of a sudden, all these farmers come running up. Well, that isn't very nice, because I had a pistol strapped to my shoulder, and you know, I wasn't in a combative mood, so I put my hands up and opened my woolly jacket, and so he jerked the pistol out. And he wanted to fire that pistol off to alert the soldiers that are somewhere there. And the damn thing jammed. All these pistols, I think the one I had was made by the Kelvinator people who made washing machine. So I reached up and very gingerly, I pulled the receiver back and got the jam out of the 45 Colt, and he emptied the thing. Then up came 4 guys on horseback, soldiers, and these were mean guys. And they tied my hands behind me and motioned me to start walking. And then one of them whacked me in the back with his rifle butt, and I dug up a nice little furrow in the ground there and got up, and he did it again. I knew what to do. I just kept walking. I thought this was going to be it. Anyway, then a wagon came up, pulled by a horse, and it's a little wagon. The bed of it's only about 3 feet wide, and my hands were still tied up, and oh, it was just hurt something fierce. My legs were hanging out one side. My head was hanging out the other. Finally, we got to the first town, and I questioned these guys if they wouldn't take off my hand wrappings. They did. Anyway, every town you go through, they are now in charge of you. So we went through about 3 towns before it was nighttime.
Now they being the
Romanians. These were Romanians. We were in Romania. So in every town they'd talk in telephone ahead, Americano, parachutiste, and all that sort of thing. And they were quite pleased that they had an officer, too. A sublocotenente and all that sort of jazz. I didn't speak Romanian. So then, the next day, they put me in a car, and lo and behold, we were driving into Bucharest. And on the way into Bucharest, everybody was coming out. Bucharest was a target, and it was being worked on that day by the American bombers. So we sat in the back seat, and they'd picked up part of my crew, so I was in there with McIntosh, the navigator. And we went to a place, a little kind of a school in the town of Bucharest, and that's where we spent a few days until they moved us over to our final prison camp, right in the middle of town practically.
How was security? Now I know you said that they had taken your bindings off.
Yeah.
I mean, were they pretty strict, or was it?
Well, I didn't make any overt moves, I'll tell you that, and because I knew, unless you want to die. In fact, the pilot of our aircraft and the radio man landed together, and the pilot, he didn't want to be taken by the Romanians. He was kind of a blowhard. He wanted the Germans to take it, and the Germans took him and the radio, and they moved him up to Stalag 3, which is up near Poland, and he spent a whole year in prison camp. I only had to spend 4.5 months in. So anyway, they interrogated us at this first place, then moved us into the downtown prison camp.
So what was the interrogation like? What did they?
Well, they
focus on?
wanted to know. In fact, I didn't know who the commanding general of the Air Force was, but they told me it was Nathan Twining. I had no reason to know the commanding general, but later on I'll tell you I forgot to salute him though. But anyway, we stayed there and in this prison camp, and I kept a diary, of which I still have, of each day and who was bombing us. And the British would bomb us at night, the Americans would come over in the daytime. And some of those bombing raids, especially the British at night, all the searchlights and the guns would be turned on them, blasting away at them. There were about 1,100 prisoners that were shot down. Some of the prisoners in our camp were men who were taken prisoner at Dunkirk. We had not only Americans, we had South Africans, we had Australians, everybody, including some of the two guys from Dunkirk. And that was back in '39 when the British got kicked out of Dunkirk. So anyway, we lived in that prison camp, and I have the diary still.
Well, explain the layout of the prison camp. I mean,
Well, it was a 3-story building. It was a girls' school, they told us. And it was a 3-story building. It was right across the street from a church. And we could see the people walking by, and of course we'd hoot at the women and all that sort of thing. The security was pretty strict, although we did have 2 guys who escaped and were out for a whole night. But they don't know the language, they don't know where they're going or anything like that. They were back in the next day in solitary confinement. So there was really no way you could get out of there. They had plenty of guards around there. Some of the things that happened in prison camp, one day we had a Romanian or German pilot come in there. He wanted to question the crew that he had shot down. Well, he's not going to get very far with any of us guys because we weren't going to give him any thing to go on. Another time, a Romanian came in there and questioned us. He was a pilot. And I didn't speak Romanian, but he spoke good Spanish, and I spoke some Spanish, enough to get along. The Romanian language is a Romantic language, and you can pretty much decipher if you know some Spanish. Another time, there were a lot of things happened to us in prison camp. There was a Princess Karaja, who was genuine nobility, and the first Ploesti raiders were up at her estate about 20 miles north. And all of a sudden, they all moved down to us. They went over, that was the low-level Ploesti raid of August 1943, which was a big fiasco, but it scared them a little bit. The next one was in April, which I was on. Then I went on the raid in May, which wasn't so good. Got shot down on that one. But she got us some beer, and they had a church service one time, and I remember me sneaking a little glass of wine from the sacrament. And I met a lot of my friends were in there, crewmen, and some from our squadron. Our squadron took quite a beating. It just so happened on that day, in my group alone, there were 5 aircraft shot down. So there's 50 guys coming down the sky. But anyway, the rumors were thick, and all of a sudden we got word a new camp commander. The highest ranking American would be the camp commander. It was a major who we didn't like.
And how many days into camp was this when you heard this?
Oh, I don't know, this was about a month or 2 in. Mm-hmm. But just toward the end, a colonel came in. He was shot down, and he arranged, this is what he arranged. He was going, the Russians, you see, were fighting to get in to get that oil. He arranged for a pilot by the name of Cantacuzene. He was royalty too, a nephew of the princess. They took the guts out of a Me-109 fighter, and Cantacuzene was at the controls, and he put Colonel Gunn in the back end, and they flew it into Italy. Flew back to Italy. and landed. They didn't have any warning or anything like that. So they put their wheels down and they let him come in. And he arranged for the 301st Bomb Group to come in to Bucharest, land, and pick us all up and take us back out. And that was fine. Let's take 5 minutes to take a rest.
Let's do it. Good enough. Then we'll go back and we'll some more
Yeah,
camp stories
because a
stuff.
lot I leave out and forget. Tell me when to start.
We have speed.
Anytime.
Okay, what I've got here, several years ago, my brother knew a guy who collected World War II memorabilia, and he wrote to the War Department, and he got the battle plan and the guys who saw us get shot down. And these are the papers that were restricted up to a while, but are no more. And I'll read you just a couple of the little things that they say on here. This is on the day of the 5th of May, from B-17, number such and such. Then this Nelson Stevenson, he's a tech sergeant, and I knew him real well. He says, I did not see the pilot, Lieutenant Mellinger, and the radio operator, pilot, leave the ship. I saw the left wing of the plane come off and the plane go into a spin. Shortly after, I had bailed out. Nelson was down there with it. I have seen each of the above crew members and returning allied. And some of the people who were watching us, shortly after we left the target, ship 793, that's us, started dropping out of formation, and the only apparent thing that I saw was the ailerons were jumping. After it got down about 2,000 feet below the formation, the men started bailing out. I counted 10 men and also saw the 3 doors come off, our escape doors. I saw all 10 chutes open. After all the men had left the ship, the number 1 engine, which had been feathered just as they left the formation, caught fire, and just shortly after, it exploded and went down in pieces. And these are just eyewitness accounts of that, which is quite interesting, and all that sort of thing. I just thought I'd bring that up to let you know that that they kept pretty good track of it all, and they didn't know at that time what happened to us, but eventually they found out.
Now you mentioned a figure.
A what?
A percentage, a survival percentage. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, it's well, you got to remember that some of the targets that we flew to would be in Austria and France, Romania, Bulgaria, all Axis countries. But the Ploesti oil fields were so important to the German oil that it naturally was a big target. I flew over it twice, but here's a list of not a list, but what happened over that target and those targets. 314 bombers and 111 fighters were shot down. A loss of 3,251 airmen. Only 1,277 men returned. This was a 39% survival. Well, that's pretty rough, but it was a rough target in that it was covered with an awful lot of 88 millimeter flak guns and probably not as good fighter protection as they should have had. On some of the targets that we went on were pretty rough. I remember one day, I think it was Wiener Neustadt, a German aircraft factory, when we were just coming off the target, and I looked out on the right side, and here were 2 Me-110s, twin-engine German fighters coming right at us. And so I flicked my guns around, was all ready to open fire, when about 5 P-51s, our fighters, blew them out of the sky. And one of them took a half roll just in front of us, and I watched the German pilot bail out. And I thought that was a nice thing that he got out, and nice that he didn't get to us. I never really got a shot at any German planes. Although one day we were coming off the target, I forget which target, and right below me coming out of the clouds was an ME-109. And I started screaming into my mic for the tail gunners to have a whack at it. But you know, we're closing at about 500 miles an hour, so he was long gone before we could even blink. But that would have been a nice shot, because he didn't ever see us. And those are some of the things. Another interesting thing in prison camp. My good friend the navigator, because he and I were always up in the front nose together, when we got shot down and taken into camp, the night before we moved into the main camp, we were eating dinner at this place where we were, and McIntosh, the navigator, got talking to the cook, who was a chess player, and they got a little match up there. And McIntosh thought he was a pretty good chess player. So we were all hovered around, about 6 or 7 of us, POW, and Mac was playing chess with this guy. I don't think it lasted more than 15 minutes before Mac was chessmated, and we never let him forget it. Mac is dead now, but he was quite a nice fella. Those are some of the things that happened.
When you're flying up over a target, what goes through your mind?
Well, you're pretty busy. A lot of the movies you see, their people are with big tempers and that sort of, it's all business. You've got a job to do when you're up there, and you're looking. You're keeping an eye out with your planes, all the planes that are around you. When you get the air full of 600 aircraft, things get a little small and tight up there. And you're watching to see if the fighters come in. We had the fighters come in one day and put a hole in our tail you could have driven a truck through. It was a 20 millimeter cannon shell that went right through the rudder and never brought us down, of course, because it was a tough airplane. But I never got a shot at any of these guys. The waist gunners, the top turret, and the ball turrets, they all did, but my 2 guns were sticking straight out the nose, and so I never did get a shot at them. But I had twin 50 caliber machine guns up there. Another time, we're flying, and all of a sudden I noticed all this debris dropping down through the air, and I didn't know what it was. Then all of a sudden I got a little closer, and they were wing tanks, and I knew right away where they came from and what was going to happen. The P-38s, who were flying cover for us that day, had gotten the message to get up and clear out those German fighters, and they dropped all their wing tanks, and they flew away from us. And they flew away, and here come the fighters, and that's the day we got the hole put in our tail. But that was one of those days. One of the targets I had was Zagreb, Yugoslavia. And the interesting thing about Zagreb was that was where the Bosnian Archduke was assassinated, which was the cause of World War I.
That Francis Ferdinand?
Yeah, I forget who he was. But that's a kind of an historic thing. We bombed Belgrade, Munich, even had a mission up in France, and that was a strange mission. We took off, and we're going to fly up the Mediterranean, and stay out over the ocean, over the sea, and then come into Toulon, France, and bomb the harbor there. We took off, and we had 4 squadrons there fly. All of a sudden, we got into a bunch of clouds. Well, it's pretty darn hard back then, without radar, to fly formation in clouds. You better get clear of one another and stay clear. So we kept our 6 ships together and turned off to the left over the Mediterranean. We happened to come out right over at 9,000 feet. Come out at 9,000 feet, right over the Anzio beachhead. The Germans threw everything, including potatoes, at us. But we got through that, okay. We went up, we didn't ever see our other 3 squadrons until we were almost all the way home after bombing. We got up there, and we just tied on to the tail end of another group that was ahead of us and bombed on his target, and then came back and landed. So strange things can happen during war.
That's wild. And the only time that you ever had to jump ship was the oil field run, right?
Yeah, that's the only time, yeah. Yeah.
What was that like? Was that your first time ever?
First time ever. And since then, no, I haven't. And I don't think that I see these sky jumpers and I give them, or even bungee jumpers. You've done that, haven't you? Yeah, well, you can do it. I wouldn't do it. But you'll know when to do it and when not to. I'm a member of what they call the Caterpillar Club. Of course, there's some pretty. Charles Lindbergh's a member. This is for anybody who's jumped out of an airplane to save his life. In fact, I was looking at my crap this morning and I found the little caterpillar pin that they give you.
Do you have it?
Oh, yeah.
Can we see it?
Sure. Sure. I didn't even know where it was for a long while. There's my old wings. Here's a caterpillar. Little caterpillar. The Urban Airshoot Company. His life having been saved by the use of parachute.
So did you wear that on your uniform?
No, no, no.
It's
No,
mainly
oh
just,
gosh, no. No.
Okay.
That's a medal. Congress passed a medal for being a prisoner of war. So they sent you a medal.
Hold that up. Let's see what that. Let's hold it up again.
Yeah, it's kind of a cute little thing.
When did Congress pass that?
I think it was in about 92, 1992. And they said you're supposed to wear this on your uniform and stuff. These were just some, and everybody gets Purple Hearts and air medals and things like that.
Let's see your Purple Heart.
This is the oldest decoration.
The oldest?
George Washington is the one who started the Purple Heart. The air medal, and I have an oak leaf cluster on it, I think, somewhere. But
Look at that. See, those are valuable.
little old things.
Nice. Get that?
These,
Do you want it to hold up again? Just so
Let's
we
go.
can see?
Let's do it with this one.
Okay.
Just 'cause
Let's see.
the-
Let's
the
hold the
camera's
Purple Heart
on.
up again. Hold some of your medals up. Hold it just kind of right by you, and then what we
Okay.
can do is get some pictures of those.
for military merit,
And that's the Purple Heart.
that's the Purple Heart.
Keep
Isn't
holding
that
it.
for being wounded?
Look at that. Now tell me about how far after. When did you get that?
After I got back to Italy, they had a thing where Colonel Kurtz gave us all air medals and Purple Hearts, you know, just like at the grocery store. So that was that. These are, that's a signature patch. I was in the 15th Air Force. These are my old wings that I wore. You wore those on your uniform.
Look at that. Hold that there for just. Tilt it a little more towards the light so we can get a nice. There you go.
Solid sterling silver.
Nice. Great.
This is something you might be interested in. It I thought was pretty good. Yeah. This is a diary that I kept. It's 60 years old now. I could read to you a little bit of it if you want.
Yeah.
And I wrote this while I was in prison camp, and there's some good stuff in here. Oh, here, Yamatski, Brod, Zagreb, Ploesti, Fisherman Mar, Belgrade, Wiener Neustadt, Piombino, Toulon, Ploesti. And I write down here, Kaput, which means that's the end of the.
And those were each of the missions.
Those are the
Those
missions I
are the
flew on,
missions.
yeah. I don't know, I can hardly read this writing. It says, our target was to be an oil refinery on the edge of town. The flight was uneventful until the time when we reached the IP. That's the initial point. Although I had noticed some vapor trails about 20 minutes earlier, which looked as though a big dogfight had been in progress. As we turned off the IP, I noticed a terrific explosion on the edge of town, probably the oil tanks. I also saw some groups of B-24s making their runs on the target. I saw that they were going through a terrific amount of flak. Our group was coming in at 24,500, and I thought that we would be lucky because the guns would be busy with the other guys' groups. Our course took us directly over the town, 90 degrees. We were about 30 seconds from bombs away when we got our first hit. It was an unusually loud kahoomph, and I knew right away it was a good hit. At the time, the flak was getting very heavy, and the Germans had our range perfect. A few seconds later, our bombs were away, and we started our left-hand turn away from the target, when we took another kahoomph. Right away, our waist gunners reported smoke coming out of our left wing and gasoline pouring out. A few seconds later, the navigator and I could smell the smoke in the airplane. The pilot told us we had better start bailing out, and then he rescinded the order. In the meantime, the engineer had bailed out, and then our left waist gunner was heard to say, "Let's go." The navigator, in the meantime, had released the escape door and was sitting next to the opening. I pulled off my flak suit and walked to the door, and then came back because I was afraid a fighter might come in at us and we were out of formation, because that's when they like to get you. I made 2 more trips from my guns to the escape door. On my 3rd trip, I saw that the navigator had bailed. Then I walked to the door, crouched down, unhooked my headset and oxygen, and bailed out. We were at about 22 or 23,000 feet. I popped my chute as soon as I was clear of the ship and started to float down. It was deathly quiet, and I could not see our ship after I left. I must have gotten turned around and lost some of my direction. It took about 16 minutes to hit the ground, and there were about 30 farmers waiting for me. Later on, while I was resting, the local police came and got me and tied me up and took me to the local jail, and I spent the night there. My treatment was very good, except for the fact that one of the police had hit me twice in the back with the butt of his rifle while my hands were tied and my back was sore. American prisoners. There I met my co-pilot. Our pilot and radio operator was still missing. I also met another crew out of our squadron which had been shot down 2 weeks before. This is interesting. But I speak of shot down before that. He and I were best friends. We went all through bombardier school together and training together. Roy Myers was his name. And he was shot down 2 weeks before. I didn't go on that mission, but he was shot down 2 weeks before. And Myers just died here about 1.5 years ago. I had corresponded with him because he lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And he was quite a nice fellow. And if anybody deserved a medal, he did. His navigator, O'Keefe, was hit pretty badly and had an arm blown off. Myers put a tourniquet around him, put his chute on, pushed him out of the airplane, but he didn't make it to the ground. He died And Myers was hit pretty well in the backside, and half his butt was shaved off. But he managed to live through it. In fact, I even went down to Atlanta one time with a company deal, and we had a good old reunion together. Then I go in here, and it says, these are just the days that May 9th, and I do several days. These days are about the same. We were waiting to be moved out to a new camp. In the meanwhile, we were interrogated. We were moved to a school building where there were many airmen, prisoners. We really started our prisoner life for sure, May 12th. The new camp was much better than the garrison. We had a canteen and our food was better. Our beds were softer and we were able to take a shower every week. May 20th is the Pope's birthday. I don't know why I put that in. I roomed with 16 other officers. We got along very well. I skipped the intervening weeks for two reasons. They were uneventful, looking strictly routine. I couldn't buy a notebook and record the day's events. On June 6th, the invasion started. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Our hopes of getting released were way up. We suffered through several air raids and many alerts, but so far no bombs have dropped near us while we were in the school building. Therefore, I write being up to date this excuse for the diary. June 17th, our food was cut from 600 to 300 grams a day, and we got meat only on Sunday. No good rumors. He lived on rumors. June 18th. Hot tea for breakfast. Reason, no sugar. From the looks of things, these people are in a bad way. We heard today that B-29s had bombed Japan. Also that the Russians were moving 25 kilometers a day and also massing troops in the southern area. I wish to hell they would hurry up and start moving this way. No air raid today. It is now a known fact that U.S. heavies are based in Russia, Russian soil. We saw two boys come in after with B-4 bags, and they were going back to Italy after a shuttle raid. They had a shuttle raid from Italy up to Russia. And these guys, and they took their clothing with them. So these guys came in with their clothing. June 19th, I ran out of lei today again. Lei is the money.
And that was money specifically for Italy or the camps?
Well, the lei was strictly, it was Romanian money.
Romanian
lei.
money.
You could
Okay.
use it in the PA, in our canteen.
And they gave this to you? They
Yeah.
gave you
Yeah, they were supposed to pay us our salary that we were making. The Swiss legation was here to hear our gripes after the Red Cross gave us some athletic equipment, but we have no field to use it on. June 20th, at 1100, we had an air raid alert. We all chipped in $10 towards a pool for the Day of Liberation. June 21st, longest day of the year. I spent most of the day. We had a show in the auditorium. It was pretty good. Even the colonel was present. The colonel was the big fat Romanian guy in charge of the camp. And we gave him a bad time all the time.
What was his name?
Colonel Stampo or something like that.
So now, typical life, just daily. I know there were a lot of periods you said nothing eventful. What was a typical day like in the camp from the moment you got up, from the moment you went to bed?
We slept on little iron cots with straw mattresses, which were full of bed bugs, and they drove you nuts. The first time I knew about the lice that we had, and we called that reading our underwear. We'd get up in the morning and read your underwear and kill the lice in you. And the navigator McIntosh never wanted to admit that he had lice until one morning I was reading my underwear And he started, he said, "You got a life?" "Yeah." I said, "You've got them too." "Oh, yeah." He said, "But I didn't want to tell anybody." Life wasn't so bad. Bed bugs eat holes in you. But we had a shower downstairs. We were issued kind of funny uniforms, striped. And we played cards. We made a deck of cards. We played Battleship. And we got out in the courtyard. We had a basketball court. And that's about it. We were up on the 3rd floor. And at night we had to bar the windows, to keep the lights from showing out. Because when the Brits had come over at night, all the searchlights would go on. And these guys bombed by altitude and direction. They would fly airplanes in, say, 100 degrees at 3,000 feet. Then the other guys would fly at 90 degrees at 1,500, so that they didn't run into one another. And they were very low, so all the guns would be shooting at them, and the searchlights and everything. And the flak would drop down, the expended anti-aircraft would come down and hit right in our courtyard and everything.
Any close calls?
Oh, yeah. I had a piece of shrapnel that I picked up in the yard, but I lost it, A close call. The British dropped a red flare at the aiming point. And one night we had that red flare hanging on our fence. And that was fun. We all ran down to the kitchen, and I had left my woolly jacket, flight jacket, up on the 3rd floor, and I went up to get it. And I went to the window, and I heard these bombs coming, just a screaming down. So I ran back down to the basement as fast as I could, and boom, 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 boy, they hit just a little bit across the street, knocked the building down. Our skylights came in and everything. But that's as close as we ever got to getting hit. Yeah.
Wow. So what was... 3 minutes? Okay. We'll do 3 minutes, then we'll switch tapes, and then we'll take another break.
Okay.
Scariest moment?
The scariest moment? I suppose the scariest moment was when we got released from prison camp. We were free. And the Russians were coming down into Bucharest. We knew that. And a couple of guys, I forget who I was with, McIntosh and Lindis, and we went out into the streets, right out in the streets. And some Romanian come rushing up to me, and he handed me a bottle of wine, bless his heart. And also, all of a sudden, bullets started kicking up around us. And I said to him, "This is no place for me." So we went back into the prison camp till we were moved out to the airfield to come home. And that was pretty scary, because, after going through it, I didn't want to get shot to pieces just out there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So that wasn't much fun. Another scary moment is, we went out to this airfield in trucks. And these were the same trucks that they brought the dead Germans into town through that I happened to see. And we got out to this airfield, and we were going to stay there one night, and the next day our Air Force would fly in and fly us out. We were standing out there over in this barren field when all of a sudden about 5 fighters come whizzing through there. And these were Romanian for IAR-80s. And we hit the ground like a ton of bricks. And they weren't shooting at us. They were just buzzing the place. And that was scary, because we were in the open, sitting ducks. But that was scary.
Break.
You want to hear any more of this?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a break. We're going to switch tapes. That was perfect.
Okay, I'll tell you about how we got out of there.
Yeah.